Snooze.
Call this meeting to order. I can see we have a quorum. Would somebody like to approve our agenda?
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda as printed.
I second.
All in favor, show by a raise of hands. Okay. So we will receive some information. Dr. Moore?
Thank you very much. So as you all are aware, this is a special call meeting, and the one main thing that we're going to deal with is centered around our budget and ways that we can reduce our costs. I just would like to remind everyone that this position that we're in financially has not occurred overnight, that it has occurred over a period of many years, maybe as many as 10 or 12, where, for instance, we've lost students, we've lost teachers, but for some reason we've always maintained our central office levels and our teacher levels and others based on the fact that that's what we were used to in our school district. You may remember also that we are operating on 10 meals for local support, and many of your local units, but beyond what the state gives you, will be based on your amount of local support. And so it's kind of like, my analogy is when you go to the grocery store and you put a lot of things in the basket, but when you get to the checkout counter, you have to put something back because you just don't have the money in your finances to pay for it. And so we're kind of at that point now. We're under intervention. The staff and I work really hard on looking at areas where we might make cuts, but make those cuts in a way that it would not affect the children to a great deal, but still being reasonable about what we're doing. And it may appear to some that it's not reasonable because we're so used to having the extra fat that we cannot afford. And so we're going to deal with that in a way that some people may not like. I see some folks shaking their heads already. That's fine. But it is what it is. And it didn't just get that way today. And we have to acknowledge that. It did not just get that way today. And so if we want to maintain our status as a school system and come from under intervention, which is, finance is one of the main reasons we're under intervention, we've got to do something about it or we'll be under intervention forever. And someone else will come in here and tell you what to do. So we have to deal with that. It's stressful. It's unfortunate. Some people will be involved. Some people that maybe we've added years over years that should not have been added, we did that. We have to acknowledge that that's what we've done. I say we because I'm now the superintendent and I feel that I'm a part of this group. And so we have an issue that we have to deal with. Doesn't feel good to anybody, it doesn't feel good to me. But as a person who has to make decisions, I have to look at all of that because that's why I'm here. That's part of what I do. I have to look at what our problems are and what our issues are. So that's why we're here today. I'm going to ask Kim to give you a little bit of an overview of where we are and what we've done. Mr. Watts is here also, and if Mr. Watts needs to chime in at some point, he may do this. Hopefully, if we do what we need to do this year, if we had done what we needed to do in years past, a little every year, then we would not be in the position that we're in today. We did not do that. So hopefully we can do it, and from years to come, 4 years to come, we will not be in this position anymore. And then hopefully at some point, we can get our local folks in the community to increase us from 10 meals to 27 or 25, like other people around us, who can maintain local units. We're not in that position right now. It's unfortunate, but that's the fact of the matter. That's where we are. So I'm going to ask Ms. Pitts to talk for a minute, show you some things. Again, acknowledging this is not something that makes people happy. I'm not a happy camper either. But we have to struggle with what we struggle with in order to get us to where we need to be.
Good afternoon. I think it's important for us to talk about the why first. Why are we here and why are we in this position that we're in right now? And so we come up with 4 bullet points to talk about the why. All school systems in the state of Alabama are required to have a 1-month operating budget. And that amount for us is $19.7 billion. We know that we'll have raises and things to come in this next fiscal year, and so we've got to make sure that we're prepared for that. Currently, MPS has a $10 billion deficit. And you know, we sold Georgia Washington and we tried to do some other things, but we're still where we are. We have decreased student enrollment. And then we have a shortage of revenues from our local funding, which is that 10 meals that we hear about all the time. So I want us to make sure that we know why we're here. And that's important to know that we're not here just because we like to do this. This hurts. This is the hardest part of many of our jobs out there. So the why has everything to do with how we're funded. How? First of all, we have to come up with how we're going to get rid of this deficit. Well, we're going to reorganize the Board of Food, of course, the central office, because we know that we're all in this. You can't just cut where the rubber really meets the road, where we know that's teaching. So we're going to reorganize the central office to try to eliminate any duplication of services. And hopefully that's going to help do that by declaring a reduction force. Then we're going to look at school staff, because we've got to do that as well. We know that the state provides us a certain number of units based on our enrollment. We are well over that, well over that. We're not cutting everything that we can cut because we think that it's really important for us to have as many teachers enrolled as possible so that class sizes are large and the whole 9 yards. But that's the other thing that we're going to do, is have to cut some of that overages, and that's all schools. We're not choosing select schools, it's all schools, it will be across the board. Then schools with federal monies or other dollars can use that to supplement for those additional units that they're going to have to use. So that's the why and the how. Some other things that we're going to do, other than cutting from the central office, and other than cutting teaching units, is that we're going to reduce the number of central office facilities. And we've been recommended 3. And you see those 3. We have Bellinger Hill, Fair West, and the Professional Service Center. That means that all of those people have to be relocated to a place that we currently have. No, we're not buying anything new, but they will be relocated to a place that we already have.
So explain that, so we're still gonna have Bellinger Hill, Fair West, and...
You'll have the services that they provide, but they will not be in that building, because we're talking about facilities.
So they're moving where? Where are they moving?
That is going to be the questions for someone in operations.
So someone answer that question. Chad and I are looking at places where we can relocate, and we think we've identified some places. That's why we're able to say these 3 places can be closed and consolidated into other buildings that we own already. So we will not be asking you to buy anything in order to do that.
Our next bullet is to reduce the contract length of 12-month teachers at Impact to 10 months. Right now, the teachers at Impact, not all of them, as we've had to rehire, we've put them on 10-month contracts already, but we still have 4 remaining that will change their contract length from 12 to 10. Reduce utility costs by operating on a 4-day work week during summer months. And I think Dr. Moore's going to be pretty stringent on that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm very guilty of it. We've been on a 4-day work week, but I still come on Fridays to get extra stuff done. I don't think she's going to allow us to do that, because if the building is closed, then it's closed. If I'm here working, I'm causing a problem because I'm using the lights, I'm using the computer, I'm using all of those things. So when we say a 4-day work week, we're really talking about a 4-day work week during the summer. Continue to reduce costs by consolidating underutilized schools within the next 2 to 3 years. Looking at enrollment counts and seeing where we can combine or come up with some differences to make sure that we're not having schools that are operating with 300 kids in it or 200 kids in it. seeing how we can redraw lines to put those populations together. And then reduce the number of unfunded transportation routes. And the transportation person can talk about that, if you have questions about that, but we are funded for certain routes. We have fundable routes, and then there are those additional routes that we do as a courtesy. We don't know that we can any longer do those things as a courtesy.
And then also, when we go on a lot of trips, sometimes we have to have a nurse. We're required to have nurses in certain places. So we have to struggle with having enough nurses to accommodate us at the school levels. And so if there's someone on a trip, on a bus, then that nurse has to go with them. That's another overtime or whatever for a nurse to go. So we're not outlawing trips, but we may have to look at how can we reduce it so that the impact in other areas is also reduced, because that's costing us.
So we're reducing, Madam President, we're reducing trips and routes. Is that what you're saying, both?
Well, with the routes that we have to have, we will have. But
Oh.
any trips that are unnecessary, like some schools may go on 20 field trips. So we're gonna look at that and see if those trips are necessary, because every time they go on a trip, if there's a child who's a diabetic or whatever, some of those other issues that we have to have a nurse for, then we have to pull the nurse out of the school to go on that trip. And in addition to that, we still have to have a nurse at the school. So one of those nurses will be overtime or whatever, and we have to pay that out of our own funds.
Let me ask one more question, Madam President, if you will. The transportation routes, now, is it, and I don't know if this bill has gone through, but will there be additional transportation money coming from the state that will go towards transportation?
Normally what happens, and I can't answer that because, that's all iffy right now, but normally what happens is if you have a route that's necessary to get your kids to and from school, those are your routes. Those are reimbursable. But then some of these other things that we do that require buses and drivers and overtime and out of town and nurses to go, those kinds of things, that's not necessarily a reimbursable sort of a transportation route.
In addition, Madam President, members of the board, I know it was stated previously in the news that transportation will be fully funded for 2020. That is not the case. What they're doing, there will be an increase in transportation operation dollars. But let's keep in mind that we were I think around 78% funded for transportation in the first place. We will still not receive the full transportation allotment because the state just didn't have enough money. Now what they were talking about was putting a little bit more monies in fleet renewal. And those are the monies that are utilized to purchase buses or pay bus debt. So as it relates to transportation operations being fully funded, that is not the case. Therefore, general fund will still have to supplement that in certain areas.
And then the last one is to review contracted services. All of those contracts that we have in each department, to review those and make sure that we're not duplicating services or that we're actually meeting the needs of the district and making sure we have just what we need, because this is really bare bones kind of time for us. So we've all had to submit what our contracts are and how much they are and the purpose of those as well.
I have a question before we move on, Madam President. As far as the contracts, and that was one of the things that I kind of asked for the last time, so thank you, Mr. Watts, I did get some. I know that in our budget, when you present the budget, there's always questions, a statement that says the board can be a part of the planning of the budget cuts. And so I guess I'll just go ahead and say, unless somebody else was involved in some of the discussions, I was curious as to why the board was not brought in. Like, we asked for a work session so that we can peruse all of this and sit down and know where the why, the what, the when, and everything. And so we're here now, and I get why we're here. We are in a crisis. 10 meals is too low, but we want to make sure we just want, well, I will speak for myself.
We agree.
Okay. We wanted to be a part of the discussion because as part of our board responsibility, we are also responsible for the fiduciary duties. We're part of the financial piece, but I don't feel that we were brought in appropriately and our request was not granted for a work session so that we could have some real dialogue to get down to the nuts and bolts, and so I just wanted to make that statement. But go, I'm sorry. but go ahead.
Let me make a comment, please, and then Mr. Watson, if you need to. So even though we did not have a special kind of meeting to talk about this, we've been talking about this all year long, for at least a year. We've been talking about intervention, we've been talking about finance, we've been giving reports on finance and our financial status. We've been giving reports on how many teachers we might be over. So all of that information comes to some conclusion based on what we're saying to you that we need to do. And Mr. Watson's been very good about giving you information about finances, and I've asked him every time, give him a financial update. A lot of this will be based on just, no matter what we say, those areas that we're presenting to you are the areas where we're really over and we're not getting money from the state. And then we have a policy on RIF and how it's done. And so that has to be brought to you based on that policy. And then hopefully we're giving you the best information possible. Contracts have an ending date. When you deal with people, they don't necessarily have an ending date. As long as they continue to go, they may eventually get tenure. That's the difference between, and then I would say 77 to 82% of our budget is based on people and not on contracts.
Okay. If I may, we didn't get these packets. We got these electronic packets a little over 24 hours ago. And I had a chance to look at this. And again, I've not been on the board as long as others have been, but I've been on long enough that I do know some things. And I looked up RIF on Google just before I got here. I just wanted to share it. It says a RIF, this is according to Google, is defined as a separation from employment due to lack of funds, lack of work, redesign or elimination of positions, or reorganization with no likelihood or expectation that the employee will be recalled because the position itself is eliminated. Now, you've carefully worded. I want to get the trust issue here. I hope I can trust what you're saying, because on paper, I see it, understand it, hate that it's happening, but if it's happening, then to me, it looks like the central office is actually making a real effort to make a reduction in force. It says review contracted services to avoid duplication. Okay, I work at South University. That's one of my 4 jobs that I do. We had a RIF, okay, in September, and I became the interim over criminal justice, interim over psychology, and my original job was over the at-risk students. I didn't get any extra pay. So if you cut out, in other words, I've been duplicated 2 other ways, through criminal justice and in psychology. I'm not just the at-risk, but I'm only paid as at-risk no matter what title I have. So if you are getting rid of the duplication but still keeping the employee, because all we have, and I'm going to reiterate what Erica said, we weren't a part of this. We haven't been a part of this. So all we have is what we got 24 hours ago to study. And when you base this on your numbers, which you have here, and your salaries, you have us saving $12,818,200. I'm not the mathematician here. But if you take these positions and all you do is transfer them, I look at this as, okay, is it a rift? Is it a shift, or are we giving the shaft? Okay?
So
because if all you're doing is transferring them, you're not saving $12 million at all.
So let me help clear that up.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you looked up what a RIF means,
Okay.
but we have a policy on RIF that has been approved by this board. And it talks about how you do a RIF in Montgomery Public Schools.
So you're admitting you're going to just transfer them over to another job?
No, ma'am, I'm not admitting that. As a matter of fact, I'm disagreeing with you. Okay, so, secondly, there are, for instance, if teachers are on this list, and some people resign, retire, and whatever, then we have a recall clause in our RIF policy that allows us to call those people back in a certain order, okay? Now, we're talking about different funding sources. General fund is what we're talking about, where we have the deficit. We have some schools that get $600,000 in federal dollars. if they lose a teacher out of the general fund and they want to take part of their $600,000 and hire someone, they can do that. But in the general fund, we will have reduced down to the number we're talking about.
But like I said, it just looked on paper, and one other question, it says teachers are making 70,000?
That's salary and benefits.
Okay,
Average.
I was wondering,
Okay, so
when
we
did that
pay more
happen?
than the salary.
Okay.
We pay more than the salary, we pay benefits and other
Health
things to go with
benefits.
it, so that average salary, an average amount of money, compensation
I see.
for a person, that's a teacher, is about $70,000.
But based on what you're saying, you guys are planning, I mean, this looks great on paper, but you're already admitting that you're gonna pull some of them back in a certain order.
If a principal
Which is my point.
wants to use his federal dollars to pull someone in, but they will not come out of the general fund dollars, which is where we have a deficit. That extra money that they get is beyond and above what we get in general fund. It is compensatory, meaning you make up for what you can't get out of your general fund in a way. So you compensate. If you feel, as a principal in your school, you need an extra assistant principal, you may use your money to get that person out of the allotment.
I think what I'm addressing is like principal leads. Then it would be if a superintendent or a human resource officer wanted to transfer somebody as a principal lead to an executive director, they could certainly do that.
If there's a vacancy there and that place is needed, yes.
Okay.
The same with the teacher, ma'am, I'm sorry. The same thing with the teacher. If a teacher gets appointed as an assistant principal, that is possible under how we do things. That is possible. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Bryant.
I don't put any money in. I'd lose.
Madam President, I have been on this board 14 years. I'm older in age and I'm older in service. But I have never seen a more unfair plan than this plan. And I'm saying that to say, I think in a conversation somewhere you all said that you were going to go to the directors and what have you to see who they could afford to lose or who they would like to move on or whatever. And I look at, and several of these things are giving me heartburn. I look at, and it's a lot of things on here, but I'm just going to pull out 3. And that's the student support services. Now, we have problems with bullying. We have problems with other things dealing with our students. And you all have on here that you're going to take 2 educational specialists and 2 district resource officers. Well, we know that the number of students that we have in this system, and according to Alabama Code number 16-28-19, revised 1975, it's 5,000 students you have an attendance officer in addition to less than 5,000. So we don't have enough resource officers now, and we're getting ready to take 2 from them. That's ridiculous. And then you have people in student support, they only have 10 employees, and you're going to take 4 employees from that department. But yet upstairs, they have non-tenured teachers, non-tenured workers and all of that, and nothing came from upstairs. Now, it's nothing fair about this, and I don't care how you look at it. I don't care how you try to explain it. You can't explain it to me because I'm old enough to know better. And then you go down here with education, our assessment department. You got to be kidding me when you say they only have 2 people and a director. And you're talking about taking one of them. We could just close school down if we're going to do that, because if we didn't have this assessment department and we're overworking them, we don't give them custodians. I mean, none of this makes sense. And then you do the same thing for child nutrition. You're going to take, let me look on here about that, the child nutrition supervisor, you're going to take 2. Do you realize we have 50-plus schools in this system? And you're going to take 2 from them and leave her 1. Do you realize that the child nutrition program is the one that saves us a lot? Because they have money at the end of the year to help with other things and other projects. This to me, I don't know whether somebody might not have been whatever, but none of this, and like Lisa said about the principal leads and the support partners and all of that, it's just going to be a shift from one to the other. So you're not really saving $12,818,000. I mean, none of this makes sense. And then you're going to talk about taking 140 teachers. Are you kidding me? We could end up with 50 students in a classroom. But yet you'll go across to the magnet programs. I have nothing against magnet programs. But you have small classes in the magnet programs, and you have large classes in the traditional program. So are you going to be fair and equitable with that? I mean, this makes no sense to me, and it's no reflection. Whoever did it, I'm talking to those people, because this does not make sense.
So, with all due respect, may I address you?
Sure.
Okay, so, you know, we have some elementary schools where they only have 8 kids in a class.
Well, I understand that, Dr. Moore, but what I'm saying, we said we were going to ask these people who they needed to move on. And some people were asked, and other directors weren't even approached. They found out a bit about this when people started talking about it. So we're not being fair to our directors. And ever since I've been on the board, what we have done in the past is get rid of the non-tenured teachers first. We're not doing.
I'm going to second that.
And-
That's one thing she brought up that is totally correct.
And we have done that over the years, ever since I've been on this board. You call them back as you need them. Well, when they come and they don't have tenure, they know when they accept the jobs, if you don't have tenure, you might be gone at the end of the year. But when you are cutting tenured teachers and downstairs, and you're allowing people upstairs with non-tenured teachers to say, non-tenured staff members to say, that's not fair. And I don't care how you slice it, it is not fair.
Yes, ma'am. So, may I?
And another thing before I finish, I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
But I'm looking at this memorandum of agreement. We are paying the district attorney's office $100,000. We agreed for October 2017, end in 2018. This was renewed, and I don't know when it was renewed, because my thing with that is they are doing the same. The people in student support are doing all the analysis, doing all of the data, doing all the calculating, and passing it down to the district attorney's office. They could get pay the people take that $100,000 and put these resource officers and student support people back in. It makes no sense for us to pay. You talking about duplication of services? If that's not duplication, I don't know what is.
Okay, so.
Okay, we'll be going back.
Okay, I know. It's no problem. We can agree to disagree.
Uh-huh,
That's
yeah,
not, it's not,
yeah.
because I know this coming in, that this is not an easy subject to approach. So I don't have my feelings on my sleeve about that.
Mm-hmm.
But we still, I think, first of all, we cannot cherry pick.
Well, that's what you're doing.
No, ma'am.
Yes, you are.
No, ma'am.
If you go downstairs and you pick 4 and you go upstairs and you don't pick any, that's cherry
Okay, well,
picking.
let me
Let's
explain
just
to you
do
how
all
that works.
non-tenures first.
Okay, so may I talk?
Uh-huh,
Okay.
sure.
So some departments may only have 1 or 2 people in it. Some departments will have 15 or 16 people.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the departments in which you need to make that work, and so we did some comparisons with other systems, and in some systems, let's say, since you brought up student assessment, they may have a lead person, and then they'll have 2 people who are more like clerical people. They don't have people who make $90,000 a year doing that job. They have a head who really knows all that, and then the people working with them know it, but they're not necessarily certified people who make a higher salary. And I'm not picking on that department, I'm just using that as an example because you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
So when we looked at other systems, when you look at, say, special ed, you look at how many people you have in there. They may have 25 or 30 people. Somebody upstairs may have 2 people in that department. So if you take upstairs and you move 2 people out, then you have nothing left in that department. So we can't cherry pick. We are trying to look at what do we need to do the job and make it work. We tried to be as fair as we could be. Yes, we went through each department and we phone called people and asked them questions.
Not all.
Not all, no.
Okay.
We phone called those, some where we were really taking a big hit On some departments, we called them. I called special ed, I called Kathleen. There were several people that we called to say, look, this is what we're looking at, but we cannot cherry pick. Our policy does not allow us to cherry pick. There has to be a process in place about how we do it. It has to be fair across the board. I don't believe in this case, letting all non-tenured teachers go, because we've talked about this in meetings before, connecting the dots. Science, math, some of those people, a lot of them were non-renewed because of certification reasons. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the list. But we were asked, why are you letting math people go?
If they're not doing the job, you have to let them go.
Well, if it's performance, yes, ma'am. But in many cases, they didn't finish their certification, and so but under this, we're not saying all non-tenured teachers, 140, are let go. We're saying where we have overages based on what your school has earned, based on the number of students that you have, that we can reduce you. If you've got 30 and you've earned 25, there's a possibility that you can lose some of those teachers because they're not funded by the state. That's the kind of job we did in looking at all of that.
And so that's where I think you have to look at 9 million of that 12 million are those teachers.
That's 9 million that we don't get from the state.
9.8.
That's 9 million that we don't receive. Now, if I take in consideration again, your enrollment over the years your enrollment has gone down. So every time your enrollment goes down, you lose teachers. You don't keep, if you had 50 and your enrollment went down, your number of teachers funded by the state may go down to 45 or 40. But we've allowed in many cases for them to keep the same number of teachers they've always had. So then, the local general fund has to pick up the pay for those people at an average of $70,000 per person. We should have been doing this all along. And then we wouldn't have the number of people that we have here on the list. We should have been doing it every year, that there was a reduction. Many systems do this year after year after year. When you have fewer teachers, fewer whatever, they cut back. Either through attrition, somebody leaves, retires, but you don't give them the 3 back. I found here, even in our departments, because we're so used to having how many other people we have, when somebody leaves, they'll say, we've got to replace so-and-so. It may not be a teacher, it may be something else. We got to replace them. Well, we're going to have to get leaner. We're going to have to operate on a leaner number of people for a while until we can balance this out. And then if we get increase in our millage, we can do more for local support. We can fix our schools up. We can keep them clean. We can fix the roof. We can fix the air conditioning. We can do all those things because we have the local money to do it. Right now, we're in a crunch. There's a need to do some reducing. Most of our money will be in people. That's because we are a people organization. We have teachers who work with children. And if we don't have teachers or others, we don't have a school system. But we may have an overage. We do have an overage in many of these departments. Compare us to systems that are like us, larger. They're a little bit leaner than we are. And so we've looked at that across the board. We've looked at other systems and how they operate.
But Dr. Moore, there's not a person on this board who feels that who don't feel that we need to make some cuts. But just be fair and equitable with it. And I heard all you said, but it still doesn't satisfy me that we have done this fair and equitable, because I have examples where the same people doing the same jobs without tenure and those that have tenure are being released. So we're going to be up to the zoo with the AEA and MCEA and everybody else, because
And I'm prepared to deal with AEA.
Yeah.
I think they
I didn't say that for a
understand.
threat, but
Yeah,
just
I
for you to.
I understand that. I know that anytime you do a RIF, you're gonna deal with AEA.
But
I
if you do it fair, you won't have a problem.
But here's the thing, I'm trying to remember, I didn't write my note down. But there are some people who are not certified to do everything. So even if you say I'm gonna let all the non-tenured people go, they are not all certified to do everything. If I let all the non-tenured early childhood people go, they can't come back and teach math. If I let all the math people go, the early childhood person can't teach math. So I think it's reasonable to look at it in a way that you don't, if you don't have to, let all the non-certified people go.
Well, you need to
I
start
think
that.
that's reasonable.
May I, Madam President? I want to kind of chime in on, make a comment about what you said. I understand you used the early childhood as an example. It has been my belief, honestly, that you just don't train one person to do one job. You should always have backup. That's just how I feel about that. Two, just knowing how just being somewhat familiar with the RIF policy, and I have to chime in and agree with Mary, starting with those non-tenured positions, cutting out some of the layers, because whether there's company staff, not company trained, I don't know, but if
Cross-training is what you
it's,
said.
yeah,
Cross-training.
cross-training, I think that there are some competent people that can do these jobs who through the years or since intervention or what have you, that could step up to the plate. But just for it to look fair, I just would have liked if it would have been across the board. But I want to support you, I'm going to say that. But I also want to make sure that it's being done equitably. Another thing that I wanted to say, the 140 teachers, you said that it was dealing with the number of because of our student reduction. So because we want to keep the classrooms as small as we can, I realize now that that's hard when you don't have money. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. If we're responsible for the fiduciary duty, then having all the pieces to the puzzle would have helped us, so we could have looked at contracts, and not to get into the day-to-day, but to have that input, to say, what does the data show as far as what's working, what programs are working for our kids, what's not working. I know you all are having it, but the conversation hasn't come here to the board. And I don't feel comfortable rubber stamping a budget that I've not had been included in the conversation. And that's what I said.
Okay, I'm going to jump in, and I don't want to sound ridiculously redundant, but understanding that we do respect Dr. Moore, Ms. Gillis, Mr. Watts, I have extreme respect for what you do and how well you do your jobs. And I do not doubt that you have labored over this. I do not doubt that you have even had the compassion to be as understanding as you feel that you could be in making your decisions. But my colleagues have said it. I'm going to try not to repeat everything they've said. But when we talk about being under intervention, I understand the money is a part of the problem. So yes, we've got some cuts to make. If this session is not the best publicity for this community to get behind us, give us some money so that we do not have to destroy our schools, I don't know what commercial we can offer the public that says this school system needs you and your support. One of the things that the superintendent said that I had, my biggest point, and you sort of took the sting out of my concern, was about how this would affect the children. That is my most important concern, and although I did hear from you that you made the decisions such that the children would not be negatively affected, I think, as some of my colleagues have said, if we could have seen some of those numbers, because it would be good to know how this distribution of cuts looks. No, I did not know we had classrooms with only 8 students. I have not been in those classrooms. I haven't seen those, but if they're there and we see that data, then we would say, oh, absolutely, we need to do some consolidating in that particular space. I think another star, I had several stars, but I did look at how hard hit support services would be. And I also, had some concerns about the relationship with the DA's office, and understanding that that money, those monies possibly could be used to support the teachers in our system. I'd have to know a little bit more about the details of those. I got extremely excited when I met the persons from, is it HMFI? I was extremely excited because I knew of the opportunities that we had to get into the community and help our children. But now we're cutting the legs out of that department, so, you know, the meeting that we had with them that got me all excited about helping with the attendance problem, now we're looking at saying, and one of the things I said when I first looked at that is, you know, if we're talking about 2 people out of 50, that's not a big deal. But when we talk about 2 people out of 5, we're doing some hard hits there. So I'd like to know, you know, and yes, I have some information on the the Association for Prevention, Attendance, et cetera, Support Service, et cetera. And I know that the 5,000 plus students is a recommendation, but we usually deal very positively with those recommendations if they are best practices. And one of the things the literature says is that this is a best practice to make certain that we have at least one attendance officer for
Resource officer.
I'm sorry, resource officer for 5,000 students. And being that we are over, I think, or about 25,000, if not above, we would very much need to maintain an adequate status. We would need at least those 5 officers. That's just a few comments.
So again, Matt, I'm gonna try to come behind everybody, that way I don't lose my train of thought. Again, this is very good discussion, and I certainly hear and see where you're coming from. Now, I wanna make sure though that you're hearing me. Over a period of time, and the information that I share with the board, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have given you the breakdown, maybe doing a financial report of how many schools we have and how many teachers they earn and how many we're over. Have we not given you
Yes.
that info?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not new info. That info has been put out way in advance of today, so that you could see this school earned this many teachers, but if they have 25, they have 30, but they earn 25. Then it shows you on that financial breakdown how we're over. That has been put out more than once, I believe, but at least once, when we talk about, here's what we earned from the state. I made it a practice when I got it the first thing this year in like March or whatever, I started sharing it out with different ones, so that from what I'm gathering in our system in the past, it may be June or July before they got that information. I felt it was important to put it out early. I just wrote a lot of things down, but the best practices piece, I agree with that 100%. But again, best practices does not mean that you will be able to do it financially. Under the best circumstances, this is what you would do. If you don't have the money to do it though, you get as close to it as you can get. On the departments, 2 out of 5, that department is bigger than 5 people. It may be
10.
five in that category, but out of that department, that's an unfunded kind of a situation where we come up with the money out of local funds to pay for it. It's unfunded. So that's another thing, back to the best practices piece. We would love to be there, but at 10 meals, we're not there. And we have to scramble and try to find the money to pay. And we have a deficit of 10 million. So that's where we're trying. We're not trying to hurt anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody. That's not my goal at all. But we don't have the money. It's not there. We don't earn it from the state. We don't have the 10 meals. We only get funding for the folks that we have that the state funds. And anything else is out of our own money. Cross-training, I think if you go look at the HR department, that's just one example. They have very few people. They do a lot of things in the HR department with a very small number of people. They have deliberately over the years, from what I can see, not increased their people in HR. That's just one example. Trying to be equitable as we can, and have enough people in these departments to run our schools and give as much support as possible, but at the same time knowing that the people that we cut in those departments are not people that are funded by the state. Those are all locally funded kinds of positions. And so we have to look at that. It's unfortunate, but we do. Certification, I think somebody mentioned cross-training and certification.
cross-training.
An early childhood person who's not certified in math can't teach math. So it doesn't work that way with teacher certification. You have to be certified to teach whatever it is you teach. So typically, you have some people who may have dual certification in more than one area. Most people don't. Some people may have math and science, so that person could leave math and go teach science. But typically, when you look at the teachers, especially on certification, the cross-training piece doesn't work.
Dr. Moore, Dr. Moore, I know for a fact that 2 of our departments, we got chiefs, directors of whatever, and we didn't even need them. Maybe you need to go back and look at some of that, because
And those
to
are the
me,
non-tenured. Those are the ones, the new ones that came on even prior to you that are non-tenured. And they're in director spots, they are in chief spots, and they've not even been considered. And that's what Mary's that's what Mary and I are talking about. And then also, when you look at this, when you have people that, like, you have an executive secretary that came before you even came in that's non-tenured, and her husband's over in Title I. So what we don't understand.
I would ask if we could keep our gallery quiet
Okay,
while we're.
but how is that, what Ms. Briers is saying, and Erica, we're all saying it. When you have a husband that's an assistant principal and tenured, and you have somebody in central office that's, principal lead or a director, and we're gonna move them, but we're gonna keep people that are non-tenured in chief spots and directors, that's where, how do you explain that? Well, I'm sorry, they didn't even come under you, but they're still here. And that's where I take issue with it.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I would explain it as if you only have one person in one spot, and that's the spot that you believe you need, then you got one person, whereas in some areas you got, as I hate to go back to teachers, but you have how many ever over what the state gives you money for. Now, I would say, you use an example, and I'm not gonna call any names, and I understand the example you're using. It'd be very difficult for the one person who serves as my secretary and as a board clerk and as all that other stuff to be able to do all that in the very best manner. So it's not unusual for the superintendent's office to have at least 1 or 2 people in it. That's all that's in the superintendent's office. I do a lot of work that normally a superintendent will not do, or does not do. So I don't mind doing it, because I've done all of those different areas that I've come up through the ranks in. But it's difficult for a superintendent to only have, in this case, 1 person. I won't say it can't be done, but it would be very difficult in a system this size. That's what you have to consider. If you're in a little system where you only have less than 1,000 people, kids, then it's easier to do it with 1 person.
well, are we supposed to have chiefs or supervisors that are not certified and can't evaluate? I mean, some of the stuff we have is like putting soap in soap powder. You don't need it. And we have done that in two, and I'm not calling any names or calling any department, but we have done that when those departments were performing very efficiently. And because the powers that be or somebody decided that we needed somebody over this department when this department was running like a oiled wheel. I just see a lot of issues with this, and I really would like to see y'all go back to the drawing board.
May I say one last thing in response to that, Ms. Bryce, please? Okay, so I've only been here officially.
No, you don't know where the dead bodies are, who buried them, I understand that.
No, that's not what I was gonna say. What I was gonna say, to be honest with you, I've been here 1 year, so I've been able to look at a lot of things and size it up. And I won't say that every position that we've had prior to years ago coming up through the ranks have been as productive as they needed to be. So I have a standard of accountability for certain areas that I want us to move up so that we can be accountable for student performance. We can be accountable for how we manage our money. We can be accountable for how we handle our kids. I can't say that it's been stellar for how many ever years ago when we had whatever we had. I can't say that because I don't see it. It's not in the documentation. It's not in the test scores. It's not in the finance department. So I can't say that I'm gonna compare. I don't wanna compare where we are now with what we had before, because it wouldn't be a good comparison. The
But you do-
evidence,
but
the
you do
evidence is
admit-
not there.
You do admit they should be certified, right? Can I get your record as saying that?
They say it this way, if a job description requires certification, then they have to meet that job description. If it does not require certification, then they can be hired without certification.
But shouldn't you be certified if you're gonna evaluate personnel below you?
I think that's.
I know that's correct.
Not if it's in a non-teaching area.
So the state doesn't require in certain areas, if you're not teaching, you don't have to be certified. is
You
what-
learn something new every day.
Okay,
So
before-
I'm not-
I would like to say something at this point. I've been very quiet because my esteemed colleagues know a lot more than I do in reference to this. But I want to say this. I think Dr. Moore has been extremely thoughtful, and Mr. Watts and Kim too. They've been very thoughtful in looking at how to do this. This is a terrible thing. There is nobody sitting at this table that is happy or even consoled. I mean, I've talked to 3 or 4 of us that just absolutely haven't slept in 3 days, 2 days.
Well, you didn't talk to me.
You've slept well? This is hard. This is hard, but we can't be in business, and we are a business. The school system is a business. We can't be in business if we're in a deficit position, not for very long.
We have said that, Madam President. I said early on, 15 minutes ago, that there's not one person on this board who would deny that we need to make cuts.
Got to do it.
That's not the point. We all know we have to make cuts. All we are asking for, those that have spoken, just want it to be fair and equitable, and this is definitely not. And you can feel however you want to feel, but I've been on this board long enough to know when things don't pass the smell test. And to me, this does not pass the smell test. And I think that we need to go back to some of those directors that we didn't talk to, because if we say we're about the students, but yet we are cutting programs and things that help students, and we have bullying all over the place, and we have truancy all over the place, but then you're gonna cut the department that handles and
supports
work
that.
with us, because I get a lot of calls and I just refer them to student support. And there are people in certain positions, they still, no matter what position they're in, they still have to go to the people that are in student support to find out how to handle a situation. That should not be. You ought to at least know your own job. If I'm line up stacks of toilet tissue or whatever, I'm gonna do that if that's my job. So I just feel like we need to go back and look at this list and see where we are being fair and equitable, and we are putting students first. That's all I ask as a board member. And whatever the rest of the board say, that's them.
And I have two.
I don't know, Dr. Moore, did you want to say something?
No, not right now, I'm just making some notes.
Okay. I too have kept a little bit quiet. First, y'all know I work for a nonprofit, and I can, not that anybody cares or whatever, but I'm going to say it. But
We care.
I work for a nonprofit, and I understand 100% what it is like to have to lay off for the kids. We got down to 2 employees, and I was opening mail 10 o'clock at night. We got our electricity turned off. I've skipped paydays, paychecks. My husband wasn't very happy about it because the children were the most important thing to me. When I went to my board and I said, these are things that we're going to have to cut. We're going to have to cut people and janitorial services, 4-day work weeks, all of these things. I understand that it is really hard. when we were running, the four of us were running for this campaign, part of what I heard, and I think some others that I've talked to, is that we have got to make cuts. We don't have the money, period. We don't have the money. I also knew that this was going to be a really difficult meeting coming into. And it is. It has been very difficult for me. I'm so sad that we're even talking about this. I think I've said that before. This didn't happen overnight. But we hired a superintendent and we gave her the authority. She has good people in place. I can't say that this is not the best that has been presented to us. And if we put something like this off, we have been given the information. I don't know. To me, it's been pretty clear. I understand that maybe there are some more places to be cut, but to me, this sends a very powerful message to our community. And if we are going to move forward and we're going to ask this community to help fund with property tax, we've got to show that we are making a concerted effort. Now, when I look at 140 teachers being cut, it hurts my heart. It hurts my heart that there are 700 children that are leaving our schools every year. That hurts my heart. And I feel so strongly. I know it is, but if we don't rip the Band-Aid off, if we keep saying we need more information, we need to look at this and that, I'm a board member. I trust the people that we have hired to bring the best to us to vote on, not without question. I'm not saying rubber stamping, but I'm saying that this to me looks like a first plan. I know we could do some more, but we've got to move forward in that. I'm sorry, that's all I'm going to say.
I have a question I'm sorry for.
I just wanted to address a few things. You brought up that you went to your board. That's what most of us sit on numerous other boards, and you do. And other boards that I sit on, the information is always presented. And even if I've received it before 1,000 times, we still have that sit-down meeting where we go, here's, you've received it, you've received all of this, but let's sit down and talk about what direction we're going. That's called planning. The other thing is sending a message to the community about the cuts. Now, again, Mary said this, about 30 minutes ago now, right? That she understood that nobody on this board was naive enough to think that we didn't need cuts. We need the cuts. Yeah. But when you only give us pieces and then say, well, agree, and like I said, I have supported the superintendent from day one. But when I don't feel comfortable with something, she's the superintendent. She knows that there are 7 bosses with 7 different personalities, and everybody's not going to agree.
I agree 100%.
And if I don't agree, I'm going to say I don't agree. Send a message to the community. Yes, we can do that. I've heard that before from our mayor to the county commission to the Chamber of Commerce. I've heard that message. We want to send that message, but it does not send a good message to the people who are working with our children that we're going to pick and choose who we want to pick and choose and keep people that we feel, that we're comfortable with. I'll say this, I believe that a superintendent that's within her purview. She should be definitely allowed to have people who she feels that she can work with. But I will say this, because one time, Mary, remember when they proposed the budget cuts and they said cut the school board checks? Yeah. There were board members who agreed with that. You have to show leadership from the top. Be serious all the way at the top. They may be good, but you could say, hey, when I look out in the schools where I am, where I'm leading, I'm in that leadership position, and I'm seeing some grumbling and some rumbling, and yeah, we knew that people were not going to be happy about the cuts, but I think, and what I'm hearing from people is just make sure they're equitable, make sure they're fair. Nobody has a problem with the cuts. I think A lot of teachers knew we were cutting.
But Erica, I guess, you and Mary and Lisa have been on this, and maybe that's why when I look at this, it looks like a report that was put together, after a lot of work and a lot of thought went into this. I don't know all the departments and who they work, who works in there.
I didn't get the tour.
So like you may know of different departments where people are there.
I've
that-
been here long enough to
That's what I
know.
mean, and so, we don't have that, so, unless we need to see a list of the,
I'm gonna
We
say.
talked about a work
colleagues.
session. We talked about a work
And
session.
I'm
that's-
awa-
May I say one more thing? 'Cause
Of course.
I swear.
I'm always the courteous one. I'll
Wow,
wait.
courteous to you. Hey.
Look, that's definitely not a slap against my
Yeah, I know.
colleague.
But I want to say this again, and I do respect your, we're gonna have those moments where we're gonna agree to disagree, and then we're having that moment. I know that, we don't have to be on the inside. I by no means want to do the day-to-day at all. It's enough, doing what we do every day, and just as board members. But I do want to say that you got to know the personality of your board. I'm reading, what's the book we're reading?
Five
Five
dysfunctions.
And we got about 4 of them.
I don't want to be dysfunctional. You're going to have certain people on your team that are going to want certain things. Not saying everybody has to get their way, but if it's a board, if there are some board members that say, hey, we need a work session, we want to be we want to be aligned with you, but let me know what I'm aligning with. I don't think there should be a problem with that. So and that's why I said I think we honestly should have had a work session before we had this presented to us, so that we could have asked these questions, and that way when we sat down for this meeting,
That's right.
we could have been informed enough to make a really sound decision on what we have to do. But I just would appreciate it just being a little bit more included. And I promise I'm done.
And I apologize, I'm going to jump in here. I have 2 questions, and those 2 questions will help me decide how I will be moving forward. The 140, is this inclusive of the terminations, the reports that we've already had, or are these 140 cuts in addition to those personnel reports that we have already okayed and approved?
No.
Those are inclusive of that 140, some of them are not.
And we don't have a number.
About, HR folks, if I'm wrong, correct my number, but I want to say about 60 of those are inclusive.
And then more people will continue to retire and resign and do things over the summer, so that number in effect can drop. But here's one thing I want to say real fast. Remember, school boards are under different kinds of guidelines from other boards. We have timelines. We have to do things on before the last day of school. We have to follow certain guidelines. We have to look at tenure. We have to look at all kinds of things that other boards don't have to look at. So the biggie right now is on before the last day of school, which is the 24th, that we have to make a decision. And one other thing I want to add is that I know maybe my processing is a little bit different, okay? That's, processing is one thing. We do it all different ways. We have different ways we do things. But in our strategic plan, we talked about, in which the board has approved, we talked about looking at our financial state.
Sure.
And that, again, is something we've, over the last year, let's say, we've put all of these things out there, and we've talked constantly about our needs. Now, I want to make sure, and I want to say this and be quite open and frank about it, that we are not attaching names yet to these numbers. You will get a chance to vote on the names at a future meeting.
But
What we're
Dr. Moore,
asking-
it's not about names. I don't care what the
Exactly.
names are. If we have to cut, we have to cut. And I'm not talking about any one particular person, but what I'm saying is, you knew you had this timeline that you're talking about. So when Erica and, I don't know, I think Lisa or somebody was asking for a work session, you knew that we were going to have this today, if it was some way possible that in your train of thought that you could have said, well, at least I'll bring them in and talk about it. We know to stay in our lanes. We all know that. But what I'm saying, I think we could all take this a little bit better. Well, I won't speak for the new people because they have not experienced this before.
We don't know what we're doing yet.
But what I'm saying, I mean, they need to learn the right way to do it. I mean, you don't always have to be in agreement with something. And we're going to disagree because if we were walking in lockstep, we wouldn't be a board.
No.
So what I'm saying, since I've done my own research on some of this stuff, I just know that it's some unfairness in it. And that's my bottom line, and I'm listening to what everybody else said, but being a part of this board, I know when some things are not, as old folks say, kosher.
Okay, so may I ask you this?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so I personally, that's because I helped put it together, Kim and I spent lots of hours going.
But
through
did you talk to all your directors?
Departments? No, ma'am, because we don't want to get into cherry picking.
But that's what you've done.
No,
You
no,
keep
no.
saying that, but
No.
that's exactly what you've done, because you talked to some, and the main three that I'm questioning, you have not talked to them.
When I talked to let me say it this way, when I talked to the people I talked to, I didn't ask them about, are you in agreement with reducing?
Oh, I'm not saying that.
I said to them, what's the difference between this group in your department and this group? What do they do? So that I could have a reasonable way of deciding maybe you could do with less. Doesn't mean it's gonna be easier, but could you do that job with less people? I did not ask them about Miss A or Miss B. I just said, what's the difference? Because some of these, in some of these places, when we talk about duplication, the name of the person, not the identifying name, but the category, and I look at them, they both do the same thing, but they have a position that has a different title.
You're
And so-
proving my point.
So I asked them, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I'll pick on special ed. They have psychometrists who do student assessment for placement in special ed. And then they have psychologists, they have 3, who do the same thing. They're licensed to do testing. So my question is, what's the difference between the psychometrist and the psychologist in special ed? In effect, there is no difference. They do the same thing. So that's the kind of calls that I made. I didn't feel it was necessary to make a call like that to everybody, but as I went through it, department by department, those are the kind of questions that I would call and ask. When I got an answer that said to me, there are 10 people, some are called psychometrists and some are called psychologists, but they do the exact same thing, then I said, okay, perhaps we can reduce by 1 psychometrist, because they have more than 8 in the department. They actually have 11. You see what I'm saying? Some psychologists
I understand,
are
I understand.
They do the same thing. They don't go out and act as psychologists. They do testing for special ed. So that was how I reasoned it out. Trying not to cherry pick, that totally is not gonna work. Totally not asking people, who would you let go? If you could let go one, who would it be? We can't do it that way. AEA would agree with that. We can't do it that way. We have to do it based on some protocol. So we can't cherry pick. That's why we have numbers. Looking at the department, we think they could still do the job by reducing by 1. Would it be a little harder? Maybe for some. Or would some people have to work a little harder? Either way. But that's how we did it. We did not go in and cherry pick people or whatever. We just looked at what's happening in that department.
Well, I'll admit I was happy that we didn't have names to associate. That way, no one could say that this was about personalities or, people that you know. As far as I'm concerned, I was just looking at the data and the questions came forth. My other question, I said I had 2, would be, you mentioned, we talked about resources that were unfunded. I'm not sure if that leads into my question or not, but we did talk about the possibility of funding particular positions with grants. Is there just the possibility that those resource officers could be picked up under some of the federal programs?
guess we'd have to, I would say possibly, that, you know, every school gets a certain pot of money, and some of them hire their own, do they hire their own social workers in some cases? So they can do it out of their money, out of their pot of money.
That's the question.
They can do that if they feel the need and they write that into their plan, because for everything you have to send to the feds, they have to know how you plan to spend the money and kind of why. So some schools could, if they wish, I have seen this done before, hire a social worker who's kind of like an attendance officer. They go out and children are not coming to school and, you know, things like that. So that is a possibility.
But that is by high school area, which means possibly the high school and the feeders could pool those monies?
Possibly.
Okay.
I think that's good.
I have a couple questions. And some of them could just, you know, number one, will Title I be cut?
Will be what?
Title I be riffed? Title I positions be
Okay,
riffed?
so Title I is, again, is supplemental, so that's in addition to. So anything that's under the general fund, they can pick up in Title I, as long as, if we don't, let me put it this way. If we don't give a social worker to every school out of the general fund, then Title I can use their money to do that. We can't make them spend Title I money on something that we're giving all the other schools. It's kind of how it works.
Okay, next, when you mentioned, I know this is small, but you mentioned that we had classrooms with only 8. To my knowledge, I did not know that. I thought that was only all our alternative classrooms. Is that true or not?
There are 2 elementary schools that have very small class sizes.
And that's not alternative?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
And I think, again, as Ms. Bryce said, digging up however she put it, the bones or whatever. There has been an attempt to address that at some point. That has not happened.
Okay, and then I have two elephant in the room questions. One, we'll start with, are we not rifting people that the state brought in under intervention that we are paying for as a county?
If you look at that list, I think
I just want to know.
you'll see.
You know,
If
they're
you
just.
look at that list,
Well, y'all added a new one as I sat down, so I don't know what you subtracted and what you didn't. So I knew that some of the people that the state brought here under intervention, I didn't know were certified, nor I know that they're non-tenured. So is it just because we're under intervention that those are untouchable because the state put them here?
no, ma'am, I'm dealing with those.
Okay, all right. Then the last one, Kim, this one's to you, okay? You, I know you climbed the ladder. Would you be willing to go back to the director, just a human resource director? Since, and the reason I say that, and take the assistant superintendent, since she's not in the superintendent's office anymore, and riff that. My question, I wrote it down, let's wait, you know, can you?
I don't think that's an appropriate question.
That's fair. I don't think that's fair.
I mean, there are a lot of people that you could ask about going back. That's unfair, Lisa.
Okay, move on.
Well, but we have an assistant, take that away, but what about our assistant superintendent, since she's not in the superintendent's office?
Well, I don't think I have to answer anything personally about myself, because we're not doing that, we never have.
This one about, this was an assistant super, that whoever's our assistant superintendent, which I would think the state
That's
put
not a
them
fair
there.
question, ma'am.
Okay.
Just do it personally.
Okay. Madam Chair?
Do we have any other information to pass along?
Ms. Will, I think Mr. Roller had a question.
Madam Chair, continue.
Yeah, I was going to give the floor back to Kim.
Okay, we're back at the. No. All right, we're at the, what we going with the basic questions that we thought that you had. I think you probably answered all of these, but I'll go through it for the sake of that we get figured out. Who will be determined after we go to the courses. We don't look at names and don't put those there until after we decide who's gonna have a relation course. Because we can't cherry pick it, we can't put our personalities in it and say, okay, I don't like this person, or I like this person, or this person is grand, and this one is not so grand. So there are no names there. Then how do we decide for the list? Well, we'll look at each of those employee categories that you have on your sheet, that attachment that you have. It'll be based on seniority in that category. Then, for example, if 2 people are the same, equal in that, then we would look at the seniority in Montgomery Public Schools. And then we will look at the highest degree that we need to go for the public school. The highest degree, that's only if it's required for that job, because everything is not required to have a degree. Does that make sense?
And Kim, what you're saying, in other words, those seniority for those that are employed in our system, but then it would be seniority based on, if they came from another county and they had 10 years or they've been working X number of years, it still would go to those that are based with Montgomery Public School System.
That's why we put it seniority based on
Right,
public schools,
right.
because we think that's fair.
Fair, yes,
But the first one is the seniority based within the employment category.
Right.
And then on your list, you have the employment categories listed there. So if you had 4 people in that same employment category, then we would look at the seniority of that person. If those things are equal, then we go to the next category, which in the system, we can look at that. And then if those things are equal, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know if anybody falls under any of those categories. I know that our plan says that we have to have a way to make a decision. So we came up with the 3 based on what our actual policy says. If y'all wanna look back at the policy, it's 5.16.
I looked at it.
That will get you right there. And so this not have to say policy CKDL, this 5.16 will take you to it, and it will also explain the recall. We would actually recall in the same way that we actually let go if it gets to that point. When this will be effective, fiscal year 2020, that's the 1920 school year.
One last question, and I know your PowerPoint, but the one you just closed out on, and I guess it, in relation to policy 5.16, is that across the board from central office on down?
What our RIP policy is.
The seniority base?
Yes.
Yes.
Our RIP policy takes all the MPS employees, not just the youth.
But Kim, would you all just do me a favor and check those 3 departments that I mentioned today? And
I'm sure Dr. Moore will.
look at that.
So are you asking us to check it as in whether we should reduce or not, or check to make sure we're being fair in the reduction?
Check to make
As
sure you're
based
being
on
fair.
those things. Yes,
Check
ma'am.
to see if you're being fair.
I am going to spend how much every time I have to spend with HR to make sure that because I don't want to deal with ADA. I know we're gonna deal with them anyway on something, but I'm pointing to you. But we have a very good working relationship, we do. But I know in a case like this, no matter
Yeah.
where you do it in the state,
What-
it's gonna be something. But so we're gonna sit and we're gonna go item by item by item to make sure the people that we present to you, which you still get to vote on, by the way. Right now, this is just a plan that's required that you have to agree on a plan. Then we go back and we attach names. Then we bring it back to you for your approval, just like we do anything else. You have to approve it. And if at that point you don't approve whomever or whatever, that's your choice. You get to vote on that. See, so this is not the ending. This is a plan we want to put forth, making sure we follow this criteria. Then we attach a name and we bring it back to you. You get to vote. So you don't get to just vote today and that's it. You get to vote on the actual person when we bring it back.
And none of us on here are concerned about names. It's not about names, it's about equity.
Okay. So as long as you understand, you get to vote. This is
Yeah.
not the all. We don't just go, okay, here it is, these are the folks. You have to actually do what board members do. You vote on, just like on a personnel report, we bring it to you, you vote on it.
So at this point, having received as much information as we could possibly receive in the last hour and 20 minutes.
It's not about the time, it's about getting the job
It's
done.
not about the time.
No, I know, I'm just saying, we've received information for the last hour and 20 minutes. The next thing would be to consider this for approval. And at this point, I would say that if you consider everything that Dr. Moore has said, especially in the last few minutes, it's not the end point. This is the point at which we say we do need to make reductions. And is there anyone that would make that motion?
Dr. Moore, you have to recommend.
You,
Recommendation in there, just like we
Right.
did any other time.
right, oh,
Sorry.
I thought he was making.
I recommend approval of the proposed reduction in force plan for the 2019-2020 school year.
Is there a motion to approve this plan?
Madam President, I make a motion that we approve the recommendation that Dr. Moore made on the reduction in force for 19-20 school year.
I second.
Okay, is there any other discussion? You need, if you need to.
You had discussion?
I said never mind.
Oh.
Did you have something? Oh, okay.
Okay. All of those in favor of approving this proposed reduction in force, please signify by a show of hands. All opposed? The motion carries. Our next meeting is Monday, the 13th, at 2 o'clock, and we are adjourned.
Yeah, I'm trying.
I didn't even look at,
This guy, leaving the room right now with the funny socks.
oh, that's, what's his name? He ran for 7, I can't think of his name.